What's going on, everyone? It's Bray with JACOJE Fine Jewelry, your personal jeweler. In this video, I want to give my recommendation for the easiest way to measure your wrist at home in case you're looking to add a nice bracelet, which is very important to your jewelry setup, as well as kind of some sizing guide references. This is all about bracelets. With that being said, let's get started. So the most accurate way to really tell and see how you really like it is to go into a jewelry store, honestly. But that's probably not why you're watching this video. You don't want to do that. If you do go into a jewelry store, make sure the bracelet is measured out to the specs. I measure my bracelets and list them on my website. If it's a lobster clasp, from one end to the other, the total length, not minus the lobster clasp. I'll say it again. Total length of the bracelet, if it's a lobster clasp, most of the bracelets on my website are lobster clasp. If it's a Miami Cuban link that has a box lock, I do not measure the male end because that goes into the box lock. That's not a part of the measurement, so it's total minus that male end, the little tab that locks the bracelet. So that's two different things. You kind of have to know that as far as how you're measuring and what you're comparing to. But that is with a jewelry store. So if you go and make sure it's measured, make sure you know so you can kind of compare, and then you could put it on and see how the feeling is. But if you're doing this at home, you're not gonna go to the jewelry store, that is fine. That is why I'm making this video. You go on Amazon, you get a body tape measure. I'll put a screenshot of it. It's like $4. Amazon Prime, it'll be there tomorrow. You wrap that bad boy around the wrist and you see what the length is. For me, like my actual wrist size, I like to go with that option first to start out with, is a 7-inch. So 7 inches is my wrist size. My actual bracelet size, what my preference is 7.5 inches. Always, no exceptions, I go 7.5. I like slight play. I'll show it on this video where it's a little loose. It kind of moves up and down, but not too much, because then if I go up to an 8-inch, it's too loose and it starts drooping. Like if I have my hand down in a natural position, it'll droop to like my palm and stuff, and I feel like that is too loose. So I like to keep it above 1/2 inch. Now the tape measure itself is like about 13 millimeters wide, which is pretty good. I mentioned that because the wider, the thicker the bracelet is, it might affect the sizing kind of like a ring does. So you got to keep that in mind, but the tape measure itself is pretty wide, so you're good there. I put on a 4 millimeter flat curve bracelet at 7.5 inch. It fit the same as the 7 millimeter that I show in the video. So 7.5 inches is 7.5 inches for the most popular width bracelets, like the 4 millimeter all the way up to the 8 or 10 millimeter. So they all kind of fit the same, for me at least, the 7.5. So that is my sweet spot. Going up 1/2 inch, it has enough wiggle room and play to wear it every day where it doesn't droop or go like crawl up my arm or anything like that. I like slight play, but not too much. And here I put a 7-inch on my wrist, and to me it was too tight. So if you're like a 6 3/4, then it's gonna, that 7-inch might do the trick. It'll offer just a little bit of space, so that way it doesn't feel like it's just like cutting off circulation all day long. And that's where it kind of gets tricky. I'm lucky enough to just be at like more or less a 7-inch. If you're a 7 1/4, do you go 7.5 or do you go 8? I don't offer quarter sizes, I offer half sizes, but you kind of have to make that decision. As long as you have a little bit of room, it's good. And also what you can do with that tape measure is just measure around and kind of measure where it is, like put a 7.5 if you're 7 1/4, see if there's enough space. Unfortunately, it gives you a pretty good idea, but nothing compares to when you actually put it on your wrist and wear it like all day long. And then it might feel good with the tape measure, like, oh yeah, that's enough. But then when you're just out and about all day, you're like, you know what, this thing's really bugging me. That's why I don't really wear rings that much, to be honest. I can't wear a ring like all day because it really, like, I feel it, and I get claustrophobic. I'm like, I have to take this thing off. It's just too tight. I feel it all day long. So you want to kind of have a little wiggle room if that's your preference. Some people want it like just skin tight, doesn't move, doesn't do anything, leaves the imprint at the end of the long day. That's not for me, but if that's the case, then I would just go pretty close to what your actual wrist size is. Again, ordering that body tape measure does not hurt because you could see it and kind of feel it. Or if you want to just be extra sure, go to the jewelry store and just kind of waste their time with it and try on every bracelet they have in the showcase. Just make sure that it's the actual size. A lot of times where people go on Amazon, buy chains, buy bracelets, and it's not even like the correct width or length. It's like they're just buying these cheap chains, and the sellers don't really take it too seriously compared to a high ticket gold item. So they'll send them like a 7 1/4 inch when it's labeled a 7-inch, or they'll send them a 4 millimeter when it's actually a 5 millimeter. I see this stuff all the time, so be careful with that. I would go, if you're gonna be thorough and do the extra research, go like the extra mile with it into a store and have them measure it out and measure the width and everything so you're exactly sure you're not wasting your time, and then you double waste your time by ordering the wrong thing because you thought you were ordering the right thing. But at the end of the day, it's preference. I'll show kind of what it's like as the lengths go, like the difference between a 7.5 and an 8.5 is night and day. You think it's just a little baby inch, but it's not. It's a lot different on the wrist. So you gotta be sure, measure it, and take all the steps you need. But that is the simple way. I don't think you should take it too serious. For me, I already knew my wrist was a 7 inch. I measured it, and I already knew the sweet spot was a 7.5 inch. I don't weigh too much more into it. That's just that works for me. The 1/2 inch is plenty enough to make sure it kind of wiggles around. Here's the 10mm Miami Cuban link I've had forever, 7.5 inch. It's just good. It doesn't do too much. It doesn't move too much, and that's what I want, but I do kind of like it moving a little bit. So that is my recommendation from at home to find the right wrist size as well as the bracelet size. How you want to wear it is really up to you. If you want to slide up and down, go a little bit bigger. That's it for today's video. Go check out the bracelets on my website, www.jacoje.com. Leave a comment below, smash that like button, and we will see you on our next jewelry video.